Unified Dance Company performing tomorrow night at 8. You can get tickets at the door of the Spectrum. Tonight, the Environmental Studies Association will be hosting a talk by the well-known theologian and feminist Elizabeth Dodson Gray. Now, this talk is a very insightful and humorous look at the male establishment, which has created a great deal of controversy. Elizabeth Dodson Gray is married, the mother of 2 children, and has a vision of our social system that she calls Adam's world. And this concept of Adam's world, she calls the root cause of the environmental crisis that we're only beginning to become fully aware of. So if you're worried about PCBs or DDT or any other environmental problem, be sure to catch Elizabeth Dodson Gray tonight at 8. Wednesday at 3:30, there'll be a meeting of the Black Point Environmental Group.
We have today, as I'm sure you've noticed, a global crisis, which involves energy, use of resources, what we're doing to the environment, food, population, land, water, you name it. And all these crises are connected together. So we do just not have one crisis, we have a whole cluster of crises. My husband's image for this is the monkey fist. The monkey fist is one in which you attempt to loosen one part, but you tighten it another part. And this is what Aurelio Pache, the founder of the Club of Rome, has called the global problematique, namely this interrelated cluster of issues. And Pache is clear in an interesting way that the root of the global crisis is conceptual. It is clear to him that we do what we think is sensible. And therefore, what we do is really rooted in how we think about reality. And if I've learned anything in the last 10 years that I've been working with environmental things, is that we don't know yet even the incredible intricacy and finely tunedness of the ecosystems of which we are a part. We are within an incredibly interconnected system. So interconnected that indeed now DDT exists in all living flesh on the entire planet. We never even bother to look at certain things it's obvious we need to leave in place. For example, it's clear if you look at natural systems, even a little bit, that the waste of everything needs to stay on the land and decompose, and the water system should stay clear. But what have we done? We got the brilliant idea of using water to carry away the waste. So we now have contaminated water systems, which we use precious fossil fuels to build gigantic plants to clean up the water system. Meanwhile, we have the land that is impoverished because we aren't putting the waste on it, that we have to use more precious fossil fuels to put over-fertilize, and the fertilizer goes through the ground and washes into the water system to further contaminate the water system. It's an absurd system. We are now stuck with it. Why? Because we never cared to watch what the natural system does and adapt ourselves to it. Why didn't we? Because we never felt we had to adapt. How come we don't heed the environmental warnings that we have as a culture? It's not only the inertia of our social systems. We seem to be able to block it out. Strange. And suddenly I looked at that and I thought, hey, if we really think that nature is our mother, if right underneath our conscious mind we have this subconscious feeling that nature is our mother, what will mother do? Mother will always feed you and clothe you and carry away your waste, your dirty diapers, and never kill you, no matter how naughty you are, because mothers don't kill people. And therefore I think that somehow or other all of us have this feeling that somehow or other Mother Nature will never kill us no matter what we do to the environment that is disastrous. But the truth is that those environmental cycles that we are within are totally impersonal, and they will not weep one tear when we can no longer breathe. And we see here, I think, an interesting identification of women and land always. The resources of the earth are feminine. the land is feminine, and we label the resources in the ground that have not yet been dug up, or the trees that have not yet been cut down, as virgin resources. Fantastic vocabulary. And what do we do with virgin resources? We don't even make love to virgin resources, we exploit virgin resources is the classic terminology used in the male world to describe what happens to virgin resources. But the fact that we talk about feminized nature, and we even use the phrase the rape of the earth, within a culture in which women are violently assaulted every 8 seconds and raped every 6 minutes, it is impossible to separate what happens to the environment, imaged as feminine, from what happens to women in such a culture. Now, I think what we really have in our heads is a pyramid that looks like this, in which God is above, men are above women and men above children. I think we still quaintly feel that we own children the way women used to be owned by men. Now, we always assume that we are above animals. We call them subhuman species. I think we're clear that animals are above plants. And finally, nature is at the bottom. We have all the nurturing that the earth, and the economist calls it the free goods of air and water. Now, all the nurturing that the earth brings to us, but subdued by masculine image society so that it is under, we're in control of it, and we are exploiting of it. And only very recent research in the dolphins, porpoises, and whales have we discovered that they indeed have as large and convoluted cerebral cortex as we do. Indeed, they now think that there is as many items in the Song of the Humpback Whale as there are in the Iliad or the Odyssey. I find in talking to people about this that what makes us sure that we're superior to animals is that we can kill them faster than they can kill us. Now that's an interesting criteria, force, because if that's really what makes people superior, then the Nazis were indeed the superior race that they claimed to be. The other species are a part of the web that's holding us in life. And Dave and I are fond of saying as we lecture that imagine you're in an airplane and there's someone on the wing popping the rivets. Now the other species are exactly like the rivets, holding us in the web of life. Now, the time the first rivet pops, you wouldn't be concerned, and maybe not the third or fourth, but you would know that you'd reach a point where if you popped enough rivets, suddenly the wing would fall off the airplane and you wouldn't do so well up in the sky. Now, that's exactly where we are in terms of the rest of the interconnection of that system. And if we keep popping them off into extinction, we will discover too late that, as a friend of mine says, we, this time, are on the sinking ark. If we really understand that we are within such an interconnected system, we would have a radically new ethic. We would not dream up technology that invades the planet and assumes that the planet will adapt. I think if we understood we had to fit in, and we would send environmentalists in who do understand the lay of the land that we're tampering with, and they would design the project so that it fits in. And I have a cartoon. It's about our world is what I call Adam's place. Adam is saying, this is the way the world is. I've named everything thought everything from my point of view. Now, what happens is that we tend to do all kinds of philosophy, psychology, theology, totally from Adam's point of view, and say to ourselves, that's the only theology you can do, that's the only philosophy you can do, that's the only psychology you can do. And I think this explains in some very interesting, subtle ways why women are often uncomfortable in Adam's world. We also use male generic language in which we say man in the future, man in nature, mankind, he, all the time. And I think that example can make us aware that the problem of male generic language is that it continues this confusion that the world can indeed only be perceived from Adam's point of view, and that the only human is the male. And I was so aware of this last Sunday. We sang God the Omnipotent, which used to be one of my favorite hymns. You know, one of the interesting things about feminism is you go back to a hymn that you used to be able to sing a year ago, and you sing it and you say, is that what it says? Whoa, gee, cross that one off. Well, you know, I did this with God the Omnipotent, because even the idea that has now occurred to me that the power of God has been conceptualized only from the male sense of power. And once again, it's God, it's king, it's ruler, it's power over, it's God the Father, He. I do not think that men are evil or were evil, and that this was why the system was created. I think that very early in our human history, men were feeling threatened at women's incredible ability to bring forth life, particularly before they knew their role in human reproduction. And therefore, they felt emotionally motivated to create what I call in my book a culture to reassure them, in which the culture is so slanted that everything that they do is automatically pronounced terrific, which is indeed very reassuring. Margaret Mead has a wonderful paragraph. In every known human society, the male's need for achievement can be recognized. Men may cook, or weave, or dress dolls, or hunt hummingbirds. But if such activities are appropriate occupation of men, then the whole society votes them as important. When the same occupation is performed by women, they are regarded as less important. In a great number of human societies, men's sureness of their sex role is tied up with their right or ability to practice some activity that women are not allowed to practice. There's a lot of evidence that shows that men are really into risk, that risk is related to proving their masculinity. There's some interesting sociological stuff that's been done on masculine and feminine kinds of things in energy. And it appears that conservation is considered feminine by men in energy, that high-risk technology is considered masculine. So what I think is necessary here in terms of risk is that we have a balance between the male who really does seek risk and the woman who, for whatever reason, perhaps her concern for the future of the earth and the future species that she has given birth to, are much more risk averse, and we need to balance this. And one of the reasons that we are hovering on the end of environmental extinction is because we have no women in technological boardrooms, corporate boardrooms, government boardrooms, raising the question of whether we want to flirt that much with that much high risk. Now, I would assert that all this equation of the human with the male is a major conceptual error. Because if human identity is born a twin, as I think it is. Not an identical twin, but a similar twin. We walk around with bodies. We all hate and fear and love. But there are significant differences because we are not identical twins. And I'm convinced that evolution intended a balance of what the male perceives from the male standing point and what the female perceives from the female standing point. And then I think we would come out with what I would call a whole system ethic, which would guide our decision making. If indeed you are basically interconnected with every part of the whole system, then good decisions are the ones that are good for everybody. Okay, now what do I see in the future? I mean, I don't see matriarchy. I don't see patriarchy either. I think patriarchy is collapsing of its own weight. I do not wish to see matriarchy because I don't want to trade the entire system dominated by males for the entire system dominated by females. So I think that part of what all men and women need to do is to nurture the emerging women's consciousness. And in order to do that, we've got to come out of the patriarchal closet. We've got to come out of ranking diversity into genuinely systemic thinking. We've got to come out of confusing the human with the male. And we've got to come out of this kind of life of anxiety in which we picture ourselves as separated and not really at home on planet Earth.